While avoidance typically follows predictable patterns of withdrawal and eventual return, there are specific signs that indicate they've made a definitive psychological shift away from the relationship and will not be attempting reconnection. These signs go beyond their usual emotional distance and represent fundamental changes in how they view you, the relationship, and their own emotional needs. Recognizing these signs helps you avoid wasting emotional energy waiting for someone who has already moved on permanently and completely. Sign 1. They've completely rewritten the relationship narrative to make you the problem. When an avoidant begins systematically rewriting the history of your relationship to position you as the primary source of all problems, conflicts, and incompatibilities, they're engaging in a psychological process called defensive revisionism. This serves to justify their departure while protecting their self-image. This narrative reconstruction is so thorough and fundamental that it essentially erases their positive memories of you and the relationship, making return psychologically impossible. This rewriting process typically involves transforming your emotional needs into character flaws, your attempts at intimacy into invasive demands, and your expressions of love into evidence of your dysfunction. They begin to describe you to others, and possibly even to themselves, as too needy, too emotional, too demanding, or too clingy. Regardless of how reasonable your actual behavior was during the relationship, your requests for consistency become reframed as attempts to control them. Your desire for emotional availability becomes evidence of your inability to respect their independence. Your expressions of hurt about their withdrawal become proof of your emotional instability. This systematic reframing allows them to avoid any responsibility for relationship problems while positioning themselves as victims of your unreasonable expectations. The narrative reconstruction often includes minimizing or completely erasing positive aspects of your personality and contributions to the relationship. Your kindness becomes enabling, your support becomes codependency, your love becomes possession. They systematically devalue everything that once attracted them to you as a way of justifying their decision to leave and ensuring they don't experience regret or longing. This process also involves exaggerating minor conflicts or disagreements into major incompatibilities that prove the relationship was doomed from the beginning. Arguments that were resolved at the time become evidence of fundamental differences. Normal relationship challenges become proof that you were never right for each other. This inflation of past problems serves to justify their current absence while minimizing their role in creating relationship difficulties. They often begin sharing this revised narrative with friends, family, and new romantic interests as a way of cementing their new version of events and gaining social validation for their perspective. When they consistently present you as the problem to their social circle, they're not only protecting their self-image, but also making it socially difficult to return to you without admitting they were wrong about their characterization. The thoroughness of this narrative reconstruction indicates that they've moved beyond temporary emotional distance into permanent psychological separation. When someone systematically erases positive memories and reframes your entire connection as problematic, they've created psychological barriers to return that are extremely difficult to overcome. This sign is particularly definitive because it represents active psychological work to ensure they don't miss you or regret their decision. Instead of simply avoiding thoughts about the relationship, they're actively poisoning their memories to prevent any future longing or reconsideration of their choice. The defensive nature of this revisionism also indicates that they're protecting themselves against their own potential regret rather than simply moving on naturally. This suggests that they recognize they might miss you if they allowed themselves to remember the relationship accurately, so they're creating psychological insurance against their own attachment feelings. When this narrative reconstruction becomes complete and they begin believing their own revised version of events, the original you essentially ceases to exist in their psychological reality. They're no longer missing the person you actually were. They're relieved to be free from the person they've convinced themselves you were. This fundamental shift in perception makes return essentially impossible because they're no longer connected to the reality of who you are or what you actually offered. Sign 2. They've moved into a serious relationship and are publicly committed. When an avoidant enters a serious, publicly acknowledged relationship shortly after ending things with you, it typically indicates they found someone who either triggers fewer of their attachment fears or represents what they consider an upgrade from your relationship. This movement into committed partnership demonstrates that their issues weren't about relationships in general. They were specifically about having a relationship with you. The public nature of their new commitment is particularly significant because avoidants typically avoid public declarations of relationship status due to their discomfort with accountability and commitment. When they're willing to be publicly associated with someone new, it indicates a level of investment and comfort that contradicts their usual relationship patterns and suggests they view this new connection as fundamentally different from what you shared. Their willingness to introduce this new partner to family, friends, and professional circles represents a level of integration that they likely never provided in your relationship. This integration indicates that they don't experience the same desire for compartmentalization and emotional distance that characterize their approach to your relationship, suggesting that their avoidant patterns were specifically triggered by you rather than being universal relationship traits. The timeline of their new relationship often provides additional evidence of their psychological shift. If they moved quickly from your relationship into serious commitment with someone else, it suggests they were emotionally checking out of your relationship long before it officially ended and may have already been building connections that they transitioned into seamlessly. Their behavior in the new relationship, posting photos together, making future plans, displaying physical affection publicly, often contrasts dramatically with how they behaved with you. This contrast indicates that they are capable of the behaviors you wanted from them, but chose not to provide them to you specifically, suggesting that their emotional unavailability was a choice rather than an inability. The serious nature of their new commitment also indicates that they've resolved whatever internal conflicts prevented them from committing to you. Whether this resolution came through finding someone who feels safer to them or through personal growth that made commitment feel less threatening, their willingness to commit seriously to someone else eliminates the explanation that they simply weren't ready for serious relationships. When avoidants introduce new partners as boyfriend, girlfriend, or use other official relationship terminology that they avoided with you, it demonstrates a fundamental shift in their comfort with relationship definitions and commitment. This willingness to use relationship labels indicates they've overcome their previous resistance to defined partnerships, at least with this particular person. Their new relationship often includes planning for shared futures, discussing moving in together, meeting each other's families, making holiday plans, or other forward-thinking behaviors that they avoided in your relationship. This future orientation indicates they've overcome their fear of relationship permanence and are actively building toward long-term partnership with someone else. The emotional investment they display in their new relationship, obvious happiness, pride in their partner, willingness to prioritize the relationship, often reveals emotional capacity that they never accessed during your relationship. This demonstration of emotional availability with someone else proves that their emotional limitations were specific to you rather than general relationship difficulties. When this sign appears, it typically indicates permanent psychological movement away from you because they found what they consider a better fit for their emotional needs and attachment style. Their investment in building something new makes return to previous relationships feel like moving backward rather than forward, creating psychological resistance to any form of reconnection. Sign 3. They've made major life changes that create physical and emotional distance. When avoidants make significant life changes, geographic relocation, career transitions, lifestyle modifications, or social circle adjustments, immediately following or shortly after ending your relationship. These changes often represent deliberate efforts to create circumstances that make returning to you logistically difficult or impossible, while supporting their new identity as someone who has moved beyond your connection. Geographic relocation is one of the most definitive signs because physical distance makes casual reconnection impossible while signaling their commitment to building a life that doesn't include you. When someone moves to a different city, state, or country after ending a relationship, they're typically running from something rather than running toward something, and that something is often the temptation to return to familiar relationship patterns. Career changes that require significant time investment. New social circles or different lifestyle demands often serve similar functions by creating new identities and social contexts that don't include memories or reminders of your relationship. When they pursue demanding careers, return to school, or make other time-intensive commitments, they're often creating circumstances that make relationship building difficult while providing justification for their unavailability. Lifestyle changes, new hobbies, social groups, living situations, or daily routines often represent efforts to become a different person than the one who was in a relationship with you. These changes serve to support their narrative that they've outgrown your connection and evolved beyond the person who found you attractive or compatible. Social circle modifications, including cutting ties with mutual friends or avoiding social contexts where they might encounter you, indicate their commitment to eliminating reminders of your relationship from their daily life. When they're willing to sacrifice friendships or social activities to avoid connection with your shared history, they're demonstrating significant investment in maintaining separation. The timing of these changes often provides crucial information about their motivations. Changes that occur immediately after your relationship ends typically represent escape behaviors designed to avoid processing their feelings about the loss or prevent them from reconsidering their decision. The urgency of these changes often indicates that they recognize they might be tempted to return if they remained in familiar circumstances. The dramatic nature of these life changes often exceeds what would be necessary for normal life progression, indicating that they're motivated by avoidance rather than authentic desires for growth or change. When someone makes multiple major life changes simultaneously, they're often trying to become a completely different person than the one who was involved with you. These changes also serve to create new identities and self-concepts that don't include space for your relationship or the vulnerabilities it represented. By becoming new versions of themselves in new circumstances with new social connections, they're essentially killing off the part of themselves that was connected to you and capable of intimate relationship. The investment required to make these changes, financial, emotional, and practical, demonstrates significant commitment to their decision to move away from your relationship. The more dramatic and costly these changes are, the more they represent permanent rather than temporary separation from your connection. When these life changes include commitments that extend years into the future, graduate programs, career paths, living arrangements, or social obligations, they're creating practical barriers to return that would be difficult to overcome. Even if they experience regret about their decision, these long-term commitments serve as insurance against their own potential desire to reconnect. The psychological investment in these new life circumstances often becomes self-reinforcing as they adapt to their new reality and begin to prefer their changed circumstances over their previous life that included you. This adaptation process makes return feel like regression rather than progress, creating psychological resistance to reconnection even if circumstances might theoretically allow it. Sign 4. They display complete emotional indifference and show no curiosity about your life. Perhaps the most definitive sign that an avoidant will not return is their demonstration of complete emotional indifference toward you and total lack of curiosity about your life, well-being, or circumstances. This indifference goes beyond their typical emotional distance and represents a fundamental disconnection from any emotional investment they once had in your existence and happiness. Complete emotional indifference manifests as treating you like a stranger when you have necessary contact, showing no emotional reaction to information about your life, and demonstrating no interest in your well-being or circumstances. When someone who once loved you can interact with complete emotional neutrality, it indicates they've successfully severed their emotional attachment and view you as irrelevant to their emotional landscape. Their lack of curiosity about your life, whether you're dating someone new, how you're handling the separation, what you're doing professionally or personally, indicates that you've become psychologically invisible to them. When someone no longer wonders about or cares about your experiences, it demonstrates complete emotional disconnection that makes return extremely unlikely. This indifference often extends to their response when mutual friends share information about your life. Instead of showing interest, asking follow-up questions, or displaying any emotional reaction to updates about your circumstances, they respond with apparent boredom or immediate topic changes that indicate your life has become irrelevant to their interests. The absence of any monitoring of your social media presence, despite it being easily accessible, often indicates genuine disinterest rather than strategic avoidance. When someone makes no effort to check on your activities, updates, or life circumstances through easily available channels, it suggests they've moved beyond caring about your existence. Their emotional indifference typically includes no reaction to significant events in your life, achievements, challenges, losses, or milestones that would typically generate some emotional response from someone who once cared about you. This absence of reaction to major life events indicates complete emotional detachment that extends beyond romantic feelings to basic human caring. When they encounter mutual friends or acquaintances who mention you, their response, or lack thereof, often reveals their true emotional state. Complete indifference manifests as no questions about you, no emotional reactions to your name being mentioned, and an immediate redirection of conversation away from topics related to you. The tone and energy they use when they must interact with you directly for practical reasons, mutual friend events, or accidental encounters, often demonstrates their emotional disconnection. Complete emotional neutrality, absence of warmth or familiarity, and treatment of you as they would treat any stranger indicates successful emotional detachment. This indifference also typically includes no emotional reaction to your own emotional state during necessary interactions. If you appear happy, sad, successful, or struggling, their emotional neutrality and response indicate they've disconnected from any investment in your emotional well-being or life circumstances. The consistency of their indifference across different contexts and time periods indicates that this emotional disconnection is genuine rather than performed. When someone maintains complete emotional neutrality towards you across months or years and in various circumstances, it demonstrates authentic rather than strategic emotional detachment. When this level of emotional indifference exists, it typically indicates that they've not only moved on romantically, but have completely severed the emotional bonds that would motivate any form of reconnection. This psychological disconnection makes return extremely unlikely because they lack the emotional foundation that would make reconnection feel meaningful or desirable. Sign 5. They've developed new social circles and completely eliminated shared connections. When avoidants systematically eliminate shared social connections and build entirely new social circles that have no overlap with your relationship history, they're creating social circumstances that support permanent separation while building new identities that don't include space for your previous connection. This social restructuring represents significant investment in ensuring they don't encounter reminders of your relationship or social pressure to reconsider their decision. The elimination of shared social connections often involves strategic withdrawal from friend groups, social activities, and community involvement that might create opportunities for contact with you or mutual friends who might advocate for reconciliation. This systematic social separation indicates significant commitment to maintaining distance that goes beyond typical post-breakup adjustment. Their development of entirely new social circles through work, hobbies, geographic relocation, or other activities represents investment in building social identities that don't include knowledge of your relationship history. These new social connections see them only as single individuals with no context about your previous partnership, supporting their new identity as someone who has moved beyond your connection. The avoidance of events, activities, or social contexts where they might encounter you indicates their commitment to maintaining separation even at the cost of personal convenience or social opportunities. When someone consistently chooses to miss events or avoid activities to prevent potential contact with you, they're demonstrating significant investment in permanent separation. Their unwillingness to maintain friendships with people who remain connected to you often indicates their discomfort with any social connections that might create opportunities for information about your life, to reach them, or for others to advocate for your relationship. This social purging represents commitment to emotional and social disconnection that supports permanent separation. The strategic nature of their social restructuring often becomes apparent through the timing and thoroughness of these changes. When someone systematically rebuilds their entire social life shortly after ending a relationship, they're typically creating circumstances that support their decision while preventing reconsideration. Their comfort with losing mutual friends and shared social activities to maintain separation indicates that avoiding you has become more important to them than preserving friendships or social connections that predated your relationship. This willingness to sacrifice established relationships demonstrates significant commitment to permanent disconnection. The investment in building new social identities often includes developing new interests, hobbies, or activities that have no connection to your shared history. These new pursuits serve to create aspects of their life that are completely separate from any memories or associations with your relationship. When they begin describing themselves to new social connections in ways that don't acknowledge your relationship's impact on their life or personal development, they're actively erasing your significance from their personal narrative. This historical revisionism supports their new identity as someone who has always been independent and unattached. The maintenance of these new social circumstances over extended periods indicates genuine preference for this separated social reality rather than temporary avoidance. When someone sustains completely separate social circles for months or years, it demonstrates authentic choice rather than strategic behavior that might change over time. Sign 6. They demonstrate genuine happiness and relief about being single. The most definitive sign that an avoidant will not return is their authentic demonstration of happiness, relief, and satisfaction with their single status that extends beyond the initial relief period and becomes a sustained emotional state. This genuine contentment with independence indicates they've found an emotional equilibrium that feels superior to what they experienced in your relationship. Authentic happiness about being single manifests as visible improvements in their mood, energy, and overall life satisfaction that persist over extended periods rather than representing temporary relief from relationship pressure. When someone appears genuinely happier and more fulfilled without you than they did with you, it indicates they've found their preferred emotional state. Their relief about being single often includes expressed gratitude for their independence, frequent mentions of how much they enjoy their freedom, and obvious pleasure in making decisions without considering another person's needs or preferences. This relief goes beyond normal post-breakup adjustment and represents genuine preference for solitary life. The consistency of their positive emotional state across different life circumstances, stress, challenges, achievements, and routine periods indicates that their happiness isn't dependent on temporary circumstances, but reflects genuine satisfaction with their relationship status. When someone maintains positive emotional equilibrium as a single person through various life experiences, it suggests they've found sustainable contentment. Their enthusiasm for single activities, solo travel, independent decision-making, personal goal pursuit, and self-focused lifestyle choices often contrasts dramatically with any reluctance or resentment they showed about relationship compromises during your partnership. This enthusiasm indicates they've discovered or rediscovered aspects of themselves that feel incompatible with partnership. The absence of any expressions of loneliness, desire for companionship, or interest in romantic connection indicates they've successfully met their emotional needs through non-romantic sources and no longer experience the attachment needs that typically motivate relationship seeking. This emotional self-sufficiency makes romantic reconnection feel unnecessary rather than appealing. They're visible, thriving in independence, professional success, personal growth, expanded social connections, or achievement of personal goals often demonstrates that they're accessing aspects of themselves that felt constrained during your relationship. This personal flourishing supports their narrative that partnership was limiting rather than enhancing their development. When they discuss their single status with others, their tone, language, and emotional energy consistently reflect satisfaction rather than resignation or temporary adjustment. Genuine happiness about being single includes positive framing of their independence rather than defensive justification or compensation for perceived loss. Their long-term planning often reflects commitment to maintaining their single status through choices about living situations, career decisions, lifestyle commitments, or personal goals that assume continued independence. This future-oriented single planning indicates expectation of sustained satisfaction with their relationship status. The absence of any apparent dating activity or romantic interest, despite having opportunities and social connections that would make romantic pursuit possible, often indicates they've genuinely lost interest in romantic partnership, rather than simply avoiding relationships due to recent heartbreak. When this genuine happiness and relief persists beyond the typical adjustment period, 6 to 12 months, and becomes their sustained emotional baseline, it indicates they've discovered an emotional equilibrium that feels superior to what partnership provided. This authentic preference for single life makes romantic reconnection feel like regression rather than progress, creating psychological resistance to any form of return. The finality of these signs, why they indicate permanent separation. When avoidants display these 6 signs, narrative rewriting, serious new relationships, major life changes, complete emotional indifference, social restructuring, and genuine happiness about being single. They typically indicate psychological and practical changes that make return extremely unlikely or impossible. Understanding why these signs represent finality helps you accept their definitiveness and redirect your emotional energy toward your own healing and future. These signs often appear in combination rather than isolation, creating multiple layers of barriers to reconnection that reinforce each other and make return increasingly unlikely. When someone has rewritten the relationship narrative, moved into new circumstances, and built new social identities while maintaining emotional indifference and genuine satisfaction with single life, they've created comprehensive circumstances that support permanent separation. The psychological investment required to create these changes indicates significant commitment to their decision that would be difficult to reverse without admitting major errors in judgment and life planning. The more dramatic and comprehensive these changes are, the more they represent permanent rather than temporary separation from your connection. The timeline factor also becomes important. The longer these signs persist, the more they become integrated into their identity and circumstances, making return feel like moving backward rather than forward. These changes often become self-reinforcing as they adapt to and prefer their new reality over their previous life that included you. Most importantly, these signs typically indicate that their original departure wasn't about temporary overwhelm or fear that might be overcome with time and distance, but about fundamental incompatibility or emotional limitation that makes romantic partnership with you feel genuinely undesirable rather than simply scary. Understanding these signs helps you recognize when continued hope for reconnection becomes self-defeating and prevents you from investing your emotional energy in healing and building relationships with people who can appreciate and reciprocate your love consistently. While painful to acknowledge, recognizing these signs of finality allows you to honor your own worth by directing your energy toward relationships that can actually fulfill your needs for partnership and emotional connection.